Welcome, Pinkians. It's the Nerdcast again, 3 plus plus Nerdcast, episode 7. I'm here with Sir Biscuit.
Hey, how you doing?
That wasn't awkward, unlike the last couple of times we did that. That's lovely. He's learning. We're here today, and we're going to talk about War Machine. Very unusual for us, I know. We've started to do a bit more War Machine stuff. I guess that's the outcome and fallout of what's been happening with Games Workshop recently, but also I like painting my guys pink, and I've been painting some pink Scyrah recently. And that's what we're going to talk about today. They've recently had quite a few good releases in the last 6 to 9 months. The Eviros, the Houseguard Thane, 3 Iris, and most recently Isaria as well. So we're going to run through some of those things today and have a bit of a chat about them. And Biscuit actually knows what he's talking about, so he can tell me when I'm being an idiot. Bet he loves that.
Very much.
I don't pay him, so he needs to get some gratification out of something.
It's all just repressed rage.
It doesn't seem that repressed. It's quite on the surface.
It's all unrepressed rage.
Okay, moving on from that. Biscuits will quickly run through Isaria's stat line, and then I'll talk about her fate and special abilities.
Okay, yeah. Bit of a lame stat line for the most part. She's speed 6, which is alright, average. Strength 5, mat 4, and rat 4, which completely don't matter, as you'll find out in a second why. Def 16. Which is alright. It's on the higher side for def for a Warcaster. 17 would be very good def for a Warcaster. Arm 13, which is very bad. Usually you see at least 14. And a command of 9, which is actually decent. And then she has a focus of 8, which is very on the high side. You don't see a lot of casters with that. 15 damage boxes and 6 Warjack points. And of course she's a small base.
Basically, she's pretty weak in terms of being shot. She gets shot. She's not likely going to survive. She gets set on fire. She's also going to take quite a bit of damage, so protect her as much as you can. Special ability-wise...
Fortunately, putting her behind a wall or in concealment does tend to put her on the right side of not getting hit by things.
Absolutely, and with flight as well, it's very easy for her to get there. In moving through terrain. She doesn't have native Pathfinder, but she's got flight, so it doesn't really matter. Feat. Biscuit wanted to read this out word for word, but I'm a lazy son of a bitch. It's True Sight for all friendly faction models within her... I am forgetting my words now. Within her control range, and also basically Signs Importance, and I'll read that bit out because it's a bit different. So for each of these rolls, you choose one of the die rolled to be discarded, and you're rolling an extra die on attack and damage rolls. So rather than the normal pick, remove the lowest, you get to pick which die is removed. So that slightly increases your chance of getting critical hits, which is always nice, particularly given that there are a few critical hit effects in Scyrah. And True Sight obviously is ignoring concealment, camouflage, and importantly stealth. That's sort of one of the bugaboos that Scyrah's had over the last couple years, and recently a lot of their things have been coming out which can help them deal with that, and that's really a sort of a point-and-click version of it where you just go, I have True Sight now and I can shoot you. So other special abilities, she's got True Sight herself. She doesn't have any weapons or any attacks, and as Biscuit will go through and he goes through her spell list, there's no offensive spells either in terms of actually dealing damage. So True Sight at first for her seems a bit of a misnomer, but one of her spells does impact enemy models, and being able to put that onto stealth models is actually quite nice. She's also got Arcane Vortex, so anytime an enemy casts a spell that targets a model within 3 inches of Isaria, she can spend 1 focus to deny it, and this is done before the range of the spell is measured, and also that the cost remains spent. So it's pretty good defensive magic tech, so it stops her from being assassinated from anything that really requires spells if you keep focus back. It's an important difference I think that a lot of people have missed. If you don't keep focus back, magic is just going to happen around you. And the final special ability that she has is Angular Reattack. So for those of you who do not play Menoth or against Menoth often, it's a star action range 5. It targets a friendly Warjack. It doesn't have to be in battle group. It immediately makes 1 extra normal melee or ranged attack, and it can only be made once per turn. Importantly, this does not matter against rate of fire for ranged weapons, and it cannot be boosted in any way. So even if you've got full focus, can't boost a hit, can't boost damage. But given that there are quite a few good shooting guns for Myrmidons in Scyrah, that's a very nice option to have. And one of the spells as well sort of makes her a mini vassal of Menoth. But I'll let Max go through that, what she's going to do now.
Yeah, one other thing to notice is that in her flight description, it does say this model ignores intervening models when declaring its charge target. She cannot charge. You can't charge if you don't have a melee weapon or gunfighter with a gun. So don't let people do that to you. Let her try to get that extra movement with the charge. Not that she'd ever like trying to charge an enemy, but she might try to charge her own models for the extra movement. In terms of spells, she has a fairly excellent list. Admonition is a very strong spell. It's a cost 2 upkeep. It makes it so that when an enemy model advances and its movement within 6 inches of a target model in your battle group, you can immediately advance up to 3 inches, then admonition expires, and that movement ignores free strikes. So it's a big piece of defensive tech. You usually see it on Warjacks who don't want to take a charge from a very heavy unit, because it lets them get out of any melee range in the game without having to take any sort of free strike. They're not going to be affected at all by the charge. They're not going to get a single attack off on you. It can also be good for her in a pinch, just to make sure you can get out of range of enemy units that might be getting close. Her unique offensive spell is Blinding Light.
Shut up. Bit with that as well is, with admonition and sort of enlivened from a vassal of Menoth, one of the primary counters around that is to surround the model as much as possible if you can, but Isaria with flight can as well fly over those models. So as long as it's not a large base model, it's really hard to trap her and pin her down if she's got that up.
That is true. That's a good point. Good spot. What was it? Oh, Blinding Light, yes. Her primary offensive spell, though primary offensive does not mean damage spell because she has no spells that deal damage. It's a cost 3, range 10. Target enemy warrior model / unit cannot make range or magic attacks and suffers -2 death for 1 round. That's actually a really strong spell. And while the first inclination is going to be to try and throw it on ranged units, it's good enough just for the -death. -2 death is incredibly powerful in this game, and you don't see a lot of unit-wide death reductions around. So that can be extremely strong just to throw out once a turn on a unit that you're trying to hit hard. She also has Crusader's Call, which is a cost 3 spell that affects all friendly faction models in her control area. Everyone beginning a charge in her control area gains +2 movement, and her control area is, of course, huge because she's focus 8. So that's a very nice spell, especially for Scyrah, which is already so fast. It can guarantee the alpha strike against quite a few armies. She also has Invaluable Resolve, which gives a unit +2 arm and fearless. It kind of gets a bad rap as a defensive spell, because usually you like +2 death over +2 arm, and fearless is very situationally useful. The +2 arm can be quite useful, though, obviously, because it does help out a lot of things. And note that it is friendly model unit, so you are allowed to throw it on a Warjack, even though Warjacks don't really have resolve to improve. The fearless can also be quite nice if you do happen to fail a morale check. Or if you're fighting someone that causes you to fail a morale check, like Legendary Butcher, because you can immediately rally a unit with it. And then finally, she has Velocity, which is she can spend up to 3 focus points to advance up to 2 inches immediately for each focus point spent. And you can only cast it once per turn, so you can get up to 6 inches out of it. It's sort of an odd spell for her to have, because usually you see it used offensively. For her, it's purely a defensive spell because she has no attacks. So it's to let you shoot blinding light and get away, or ancillary attack and then scoot back behind cover or back into a forest or something like that. And that sums up her spell list.
It's a pretty solid spell list. I think as well with Blinding Light, a lot of people have been noticing that it is target enemy warrior model unit. So just need to be a bit aware of that. But yeah, Blinding Light, Crusader's Call, excellent for Ret in that they have a lot of very good infantry units, along with the feat, obviously, Dawn's Light, and those spells really make them better in terms of either weakening the opponent or making them faster, as Biscuit mentioned. Getting that first strike with already such a fast army is now a lot easier. I mean, particularly when you take in the new House Guard Thane for Halberders, that's a 15-inch threat range, and that's pretty far. So yeah, some very nice spells to have on there. A lot of focus, though, to be using. I mean, she does have a focus stat of 8. She obviously wants some sort of Warjack, or Myrmidon, sorry, with ancillary attack that's going to be good shooting. But then you've got Blinding Light and Crusader's Call both cost 3, and Crusader's Call isn't going to be cast that often. It's probably going to be a 1 or 2 turn thing, but Blinding Light you'd love to be able to throw out twice a turn, really neutering 2 units. Again, as Max said, it's not going to be is useful defensively against a melee unit, but you can still then turn around and shoot that melee unit or combat that melee unit quite hard. But then stopping a ranged unit as well from shooting is quite good defensively. But if you're casting it twice, that's 6 out of her 8 focus already. She's really squishy, so you're not going to be able to overboost her power field or anything like that. If you want to power a Jack as well, you're then looking at using all your focus already, and that's without using any of her other spells or upkeeps. So looking for ways to try and maximize her focus and help out, I think, is going to be key to unlocking her lists. But otherwise, she seems really flexible straight off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that you're probably going to want to take the Wish Elf, as we call him around here. The
Wish Nailer.
Yeah, Silas Wish Nailer.
Silas.
Yeah. So many letters.
It's going to be hard, I think, with that. Yeah, he does a lot for all of Retribution casters. Unfortunately, or fortunately in that he's such a good model, but unfortunately, given that he's a character, every list can't take him. So it's going to be a case of who needs him the most. And I know a lot of people have paired her up initially with Evaros because he's got such an aggressive list, either in tier or using Griffin spam, using Isaria sort of as the attrition caster or the ranged caster. Who are you going to give the Wish Nailer to? And that becomes quite an important decision.
Right. I'd have to say I would almost always give it to her because she does have such problems with focus. She can do
they're
so
good
much.
Problems.
She reminds me
they're
of
good problems.
Elprios, actually. In that she can do so many different things, and you actually are going to have to pick what you want her to be doing and just not do some of her tricks.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do everything, particularly with the list as well. If you try and go for every type of option possible, you're going to end up going, oh, well, that unit's not playing at its effectiveness today or in this turn because I can't actually feel that concept.
Right, exactly.
So on that note, Biscuit's talking about Threos, who in Menoth obviously they've got a lot of good options to help with focusing at Rax, Hierophant, and then the Choir just to make their Jacks ridiculously good. Scyrah's obviously got the Arcanist, which can help in terms of focus management and also making when those Jacks charge in that a little bit better with the +2 on the rolls. Any other options that you can think of?
Well, the point I was more making is that you can look at her and she can be a very strong Jack caster. Just with Crusader's Call and Voluble Resolve and the Admonition is a great combo for Retribution Jacks, which are already fast. But if you do that, then you're not going to have the focus to run her infantry heavy and be throwing around a lot of Blinding Light.
Yep.
And using that Crusader's Call for more infantry charges. You're going to miss out on a lot of feat rolls as well. So you have to really pick when you're building a list with her whether you're going to want to do like a heavy armor, hard hitting list, or whether you're going to want to do an infantry list kind of thing. And the reason I was bringing up Thrios is the legendary Thrios is because he kind of has the same thing going on, where he can play a strong assassination game, he can play a very strong jack list, and he can play a very strong infantry heavy list. And so you can't build a list that maximizes all three. And if you try, you're going to end up very underwhelming.
Yeah, I think as well with given particularly the steamroller format and that you're taking multiple casters to a tournament, generally you're using the other casters that you've got with red to say, okay, this is what they're doing well on. They generally only have a couple of things that they do well on. That's been a problem with red for a while. Given that she's so flexible, you then say, okay, this is then what I want her to do, and build the list around that secondary or third concept that you need, depending on how many casters you're taking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know as well a lot of people have been talking about Ilara on some of the forums. I'm not a huge fan of that model. I think she's really bad, but she does offer up 4 more focus to her. Do you have any thoughts on that initially, I guess?
Let me pull up her rules really quick to make sure that I'm not getting anything wrong.
Basically, did you want I think it's a 3-point model, 4 focus, with countercharge.
Got it.
You got it?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I really don't like her because she just seems very fragile to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the journeyman warcasters are very hit or miss.
Mm. She ain't no Tristan.
The biggest problem I have pairing her with Issyria is that if she dies and her jacks become inert, Issyria really, really does not want to run up and reactivate them.
Mm.
Like, she does not have the defensive stats to be jumping around the front line for a turn, even if you're trying to velocity back afterwards. That's so dangerous.
Yeah.
So, again, I would say, like, you just have to pick how you want to build your list.
Yeah, I think as well, a lot of people have been trying to put Lara in to run that extra jack that they don't really need, and then trying to maximize everything as possible, and again, pick something and make it work with her. She's got the spell list to be really flexible. She's got the capacity to, we're not saying don't run any jacks at all, but she can run 1 really well, probably 2, if you're looking for that second arc node. But if you're looking at more than that and still wanting to run some infantry and use Blinding Light, Crusader's Call, you need to pick something and say, this is what she's going to do.
Right. I see her as being very strong with an infantry heavy list, but she's using Blinding Light to support from arc nodes. And then keeping those jacks back in the line and trying to avoid committing them until you absolutely have to. Yep. And then letting your infantry pick up and be the workhorse. Because with Dawn's Light and Blinding Light, she can play a very strong attrition game.
Given that Dawn's Light as well, the more rolls that you're making, the more impact it's going to have. So if you've got 20, 30 infantry out there making attacks compared to 3 or 4 heavy jacks, you're getting more benefit out of it.
Again, real quick, because this is a little confusing. Dawn's Light is her feat. Blinding Light is her spell.
Let's just call it D-Light and B-Light. Make it even more confusing.
Dawn's Light is that you roll an extra die and discard one choice. Blinding Light is the one that the warrior model unit can't make ranged magic attacks and has -2 death.
And for the War Machine and Hordes uninitiated, the feat only happens once a turn. You can only use it once, while Blinding Light's a spell that can be cast multiple times if you have the focus for it.
Right, and Blinding Light you might not want to throw out like twice a turn, but once a turn is kind of a game changer.
Yeah, once a turn is going to be pretty consistent, and there might be times I think when you can say, okay, I don't need to fuel anything here, or I don't need to cast Crusader's Call, I'll whack it twice, particularly if you're playing against, I think, a gunline list or anything like that, or a magic heavy list where you can say, all right, those 2 units, either I'm killing them both, or they're not doing anything the next turn in terms of ranged or magic attacks.
Right, if you can get close enough to zap them with it. It is a shame that it doesn't work on jacks, because Blinding Light would be so powerful on Colossals.
Yes, it would. Poor Colossals, just anything to stop them from doing anything. Bye-bye 19 points. As well with that, I mean, that's where Wishnailer can come in handy, because it's range 10 Blinding Light, and Wishnailer can give an extra 2 inches on that, and 12 inches is quite solid. particularly with velocity. So if you do have your arc nodes either get bogged down or they get a bit of a smack in the face and disappear, you're still able to cast it. It's not like it's a 6-inch range offensive spell where you have to get up close and personal to get that off.
Right. He also helps out with Arcane Secrets for her, which is huge on Blinding Light because you get to roll an extra die on the attack roll and discard the lowest.
Yep.
And given that she's already focus 8, it means you don't really need to boost.
Which saves you a focus.
If you're shooting at something kind of hard to hit.
Yeah, and that's saving you a focus as well. So Wishnailer is just a solid pick for any pointy ear out there.
Right.
And the stupid Kadorians.
Wow. They like him too.
It's true. Just stop. You're making me cry. Bloody Russians.
Yeah. So in terms of jacks for her, what are your initial thoughts?
My initial, straight off the bat, and I'm sure most people would reach for this jack 9 times out of 10. First off, for any Retcaster is the Phoenix. It's an arc node. It's heavy. It's fast. It's got good infantry clearing. It's got a good infantry clearing gun, and it's very good in combat as well. It's basically everything that you want, but at the same time, as Biscuit was saying before, you need to be careful in terms of committing it because it is an arc node as well, and if that's what you're using it for, you don't want to just be throwing it straight away into the fray. But yeah, that would be my first reach for. If you're looking for another arc node, a Chimera certainly isn't a bad option. I'm not a huge fan of the Chimera because I think the Phoenix is overall a better jack and you don't have to throw it in. But if I was going for 2 arc nodes, I think my second arc node would be a Chimera.
Yeah, I don't mind the Chimera, I guess. I'm not the biggest fan of lights in War Machine.
Yeah.
Because their offensive
Griffin's band, bitch.
abilities tend to be pretty bad. So if you're buying a Chimera, they're, 4 points, I think?
6 points.
They're 6 points. Okay,
Yeah.
So you're buying a 6-point arc node, and that's about all you're buying. It's like, yes, it can kill things in a pinch, but only if it really comes to it. Otherwise, it's just an expensive way to get your spells up there. I would almost spend the extra 4 points and take the second Phoenix if I wanted a second arc node, just because they can be a can opener if you need them to be.
Yeah, my initial reaction would be quite similar to yours, but playing Devil's Advocate in the Chimera's defense, it is faster, particularly with Apparition. I think that's a 24 threat range for Blinding Light, so if you're really trying to tag something with it, you can get it there. Admonition and Apparition with the Chimera as well can keep it quite survivable and out of the enemy's reach, but again, I guess I'd rather be spending more points on something that gets damaged, but then I'd be worried about fueling 2 Phoenixes at the same time.
Right, that can be difficult. I guess I'm thinking that you probably don't need to commit both Phoenixes at the same time.
Yeah, unless there's a Colossal out there.
Yeah, I suppose, yes. But then you can afford to.
Yep.
You don't need to be doing all your other tricks at the same time.
Yeah, and then again, at the same time, if you're doing that, there are very good ret options out there for dealing with Colossals. I mean, if you put Sentinels into a Colossal with Dawn's Light, the feet up, that's quite likely a very unhappy Colossal. Weapon Master Infantry do that.
And even the Mage Hunter Strike Force,
it depends
unbuffed, will take out half a Colossal. If you put them under Dawn's Light, you're probably having a pretty good time.
No Gargantuans there, though, unfortunately.
No, not helping too much there. But you don't really see a lot of Gargantuans, so that's not that big of a deal. My issue with the Gorgon more than anything is that while it looks on first glance really good, I found that Apparition does not come into play that often. When people commit to killing a light Warjack, it goes away. It doesn't get to stick around for a couple turns and play cute teleporty shenanigan games.
Unless his name is Blessing of Vengeance.
Well, yeah, but then you don't really tend to throw him out there. Like you were saying, the Gorgon, or the Chimera, can have a very big threat range because you can throw it.
Absolutely,
light out.
I think,
kind of the Crick's Bonejack trick.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be doing that as well,
you're not a Bonejack, and you don't play Crick's game. That's what Crick's does.
I thought they were all undead and shit. But yeah, no, I think if you were going to use that massive threat range as well, it would be sort of on a last gasp or just try and set up an assassination run on the caster, then using the red infantry to follow up. But yeah, I certainly agree. My initial reaction is not really a fan of the Chimera. If I was going to take a light Warjack with Isaria, I'd be probably going for the Aspis first, just to give her some more defensive tech in protecting her from ranged assassinations. But given that she's got such a large control range, and there's going to be so much between her and the opponent, that's not as big of an issue, I think, as many have made it out to be. But having something like an Aspis helps quite significantly with that.
Yeah, I think she's generally okay, being that she's Def 16, as long as she can find somewhere to stand.
Yeah.
Ideally, cover, obviously, but in a pinch, a forest would even be fine. It means that she's pretty immune to most simple ranged assassinations.
Do not get her in range of Mage Hunter Assassin Strike Force.
No, I mean, obviously you gotta avoid E-Cane and the Mage Hunter Strike Force and all the other things that are just so accurate.
Yep.
But in terms of like pot shots coming her direction, she's fairly safe.
Yeah. And I think, again, particularly if the opponent's breaking through to the back of your army, you're probably in a pretty bad situation anyways, rather than an opponent having set up a very nice assassination run. Normal defensive tech in terms of putting your models together and developing, the table as the game unfolds is going to protect against that more than sinking a ton of points into getting artificers or multiple Aspi. That being said, I think if you've brought an Aspis, it's not a bad idea, and you can probably play a bit more aggressive with her against an army that's got some more shooting in it. I wouldn't say throw her on the front line, but you have that option then, and at least the Aspis is only 4 points rather than the 6-point Chimera.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, I like the Aspis quite a lot, actually, for a light, even though I don't like lights. That one tends to come through decently.
And he's got Balfus. That's pretty cool.
It's so neat.
We're little children.
Yeah. I think something I would say is that you can kind of broadly categorize most Warcasters into one of three categories. Where you have assassination casters, which don't necessarily just play to assassinate, but they use their potential to assassinate to kind of control the board, and their personal power can very much come into play and win games. You have buff casters, like Evlad is an excellent example of this, where basically they just buff up their army. They apply these selective buffs and they go to town on things. And then you have control casters, which are very good at affecting the board and controlling the board. And Harbinger's a great example of a control caster with her feats and Crusader's Call and all the stuff she does to just establish complete domination over how the board looks. And Issyria is, obviously a lot of casters fall between camps, and Issyria is very much like a buff control caster because you can use Crusader's Call to just hugely affect your positioning. Also, the hidden fun effect of Focus 8 is that you get to pre-measure a lot of stuff. So you can do the Harbinger trick where you basically put your infantry an inch out of your enemy's charge range, and then they have to choose whether to run and engage you, advance and take your charge, or fall back and get set up in the same situation again, because you're always going to be faster than them on the charge.
And as well, because of scenarios, if they're falling back, you're likely starting to gain scenario points and pushing them further away from getting into that position, and that's giving you table dominance.
Yeah, I said falling back is an option, but please, listeners, realize it's not an option. You can't fall back. It doesn't work.
You can. It just... Yeah. It's not that effective. Particularly if we haven't even talked about tier lists as well, but tier lists can be really disgustingly fast with Halberders, getting them an extra, I think, 4 inches of movement with the Thane on that first turn run. So that's jamming them up really, really far, really, really quickly. Other jacks, I guess, that we'd have a look at. Banshee is one that, has got a very good gun, so ancillary attack is going to be very good with, double slams. I'm not going to say no to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Phoenix Banshee.
Yep.
I think would be pretty decent with her.
Again, I guess you'd need to be concerned about charging both of them with focus.
Right. Though the Banshee can run pretty focus light generally.
If
and,
you're
probably going to throw in a couple Arcanists to power booster if you need to, which frees up a lot of your early game focus at least. I also think she can get by not committing both her jacks at once.
Yeah.
So I really like the Banshee in there because then you don't have to worry about losing your Arcanode. Like you can commit your Banshee and then she can still sit back with your Phoenix. She can double tap the Halo Cannon and cast spells through it without having to worry about being too exposed.
And then you still got that backup heavy.
Yeah, and again, like I can't overstate the importance of Crusader's Call because it's a path to choose how you want to engage. Like the fact that you're so fast means that you get to choose what the initial setup and the initial conflict is going to look like, which is enormous in War Machine. Generally, obviously, there are some armies that are faster than you, but generally, you're going to be the one choosing that, which means you can choose to have this protected arc node in the back, and you can choose where your jacks are going to be committed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's important, obviously, to know that and utilize that to your advantage. And obviously, the jack, I guess, that's been talked quite a bit about is the Colossal and the Hyperion. Double crit consume, 5-inch AoEs, power 15 is what everybody's going on about. And it's quite nice, I think, but I think a lot of people are making too much fuss about getting crit consume off basically only under the feet.
Right. I would say it's still just not reliable, because even if you're dropping one, picking which dice you want, your odds of doubles on 3d6 are 44%, right?
If you're hitting on Snake Eyes as well, which you don't, so it drops down to 38.
Right, yeah. So, 38% chance to crit is pretty unreliable.
Yeah. And that's 2 shots. And that's under feet as well. And obviously most people are probably going to boost that to try and get that to happen. And I think, again, that's only putting you up to about, and I'm going off the top of my head here, but around 60%. Again, it's cool when it goes off, but that's 1 turn under feet. Yay?
Right, yeah. Also, I think it's a little bit excessive because she comes with all these tools to deal with infantry.
Yeah.
Because you have Crusader's Call and you have Blinding Light.
You have such good infantry
anyway.
anyway.
You're not removing a lot of small-based infantry given those two.
And not saying that it's bad, but I don't think it's the first thing that I'd be reaching for.
No, and there is quite a lot to be said for the 2 POW 18 shots a turn.
POW 15.
The Starburst is 18 in my book.
Is it? I thought it was 15.
Look it up.
I don't want to. We'll just say 15/18. And I guess final jack that I'd mention as well would be Discordia. 2 POW 14 10-inch sprays. That's pretty solid.
That is pretty nice.
Yep. As well as that, her imprint's quite nice, and just providing that little bit of extra protection to Isaria, particularly given her low arm in those random scattering blasts coming and giving her a whack on top of the head.
Yeah, Discordia is always quite good. You might be able to run her behind Discordia reasonably close. As always, you have to look out for slams. Especially since she has such low arm to resist them.
Doesn't want to slam Jack in her.
Right. Like, you don't want someone to run up and slam Discordia into you. And I forget, I believe that knocks her down, too. That would be death for her. That'd be game over.
No defense then at all, and, if there's any shooting left, you can wave bye-bye to her.
Right, just terrible arm, and you're probably not going to be camping a lot of focus with her. So, it's dangerous, but, against a lot of lists that can't punish you very well for it, like lists that don't bring a lot of range firepower or a lot of speed. It could be particularly effective.
Yeah.
Again, like, the spray is nice, but I think she already brings a lot of anti-infantry clearing in kind of inherent in her spell list.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't want to say like it's a bad combo or anything because I think there's a lot of potential there. That one's hard to theory out and figure out how good it is.
Well, you just aren't a disco fan, so.
I'm just, it's scary to have a caster with these stats up that close to the front.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I keep thinking ancillary attack might be kind of a trap with her.
You can, I mean, 5-inch range as well. Most of the ranges for their guns are 10 inches, so it's at least putting you 15 inches back from the back line. You can velocity back as well afterwards, so.
Right, assuming that your Jack's also in the back line.
Yeah,
and then if you're spending
shooting.
velocity, like that's focused, you might not necessarily have.
Yeah. But let's say as well, particularly with the Phoenix, I guess you've got the Halo cannon. You're using it as an arc node as well, so it can sort of be sitting in the back as well. But then again, if you're velocitying, ancillary attacking, fueling, say, a Banshee charging up, casting Blinding Light through an arc node, that's your focus.
Right, yeah.
You're not casting Crusader's
and
Call.
And you'd still really like to have Invaluable Resolve.
And you'd like to be casting Crusader's Call if you're fueling the Banshee so it can then go up and assault. You'd like to really cast another Blinding Light just because, you'd like to do that. You'd like to have a focus left just in case there's a magic spell coming your way next turn, etc., etc., etc.
Right, I don't see Arcane Vortex being used terribly much with her.
Don't lie.
I mean, against some lists, there are some casters.
Yeah, it'll have some of those situational uses, particularly if an opposing caster relies on a spell-based assassination run. Keep a couple focus, and then you can just simply stop them from doing that. But a lot of the time, let's say he can then turn around and still be shooting the crap out of everything. So it has its uses, but it's certainly not the thing that you're going to be looking for on her card all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I would say with her, you generally want to have both your upkeep stuff, because Admonition and Invaluable Resolve are both quite good.
Take the Wish Nailer.
So yeah, take the Wish Nailer. And I mean, Arcanists can help a lot, because they can effectively let you run your Jacks for free. And I mean literally, like, run in this case. They can make run actions without you having to spend focus.
Always useful.
Yeah, always good. Plus the +2 POW is very, very strong for them.
Particularly when you're
just
sending
in every
that in.
Retribution list.
Mm-hmm. And speaking, I guess, of the things that we're now including outside of the Jacks, any other solos that have just jumped out to you? I mean, Mage Hunter Assassins under feet are even more ridiculous than normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that needs to be said, Give them.
Can you tell I'm not the hugest fan of those guys?
Well, I guess the main issue that they have has always been they have one attack, and if they miss, they're screwed. Feet.
Right. I always tell people if you're good at roulette, then take Mage Hunter.
Who's good at roulette? But yeah, it's under the feet. They're more accurate. They're more reliable. Under as well, if they're hitting a target that's being hit with blinding light. Again, they're effectively +2 mat, so it's useful. They can help put pressure on, but they're not always the one that's going to do there. Again, I'm sure if you looked at the statistics, it's probably a 50-50 chance, even with all of that under there. Certainly threatening, but then 5 hit point stealth solos are things that most people generally can deal with these days. Yeah,
I would also say that if you're taking Wish Nailer and you're taking Dual Arcanist, you're already 4 points in the solos. It's easy to fall into a trap where you spend too many points on solos and you just don't end up with enough meat in your army, and you end up with this really fragile list that has to engage perfectly to get all its tricks off.
And you haven't even got a Houseguard Thane yet. To add
right, yeah.
Make it 6 points.
Make it 6 points, right, yeah. So for that reason, I think I'd avoid them, and I'd focus more on taking meaty units.
Mm-hmm.
Because you probably want the Mage Hunter Strike Force with her, because it gives you a lot of options for dealing with armor.
Well, I guess my initial reactions, I guess, when I first started, the 3 units that I wanted to reach for were full Halbs in UA, full Mage Hunter in UA, and Fulham Victors in UA.
Right. I would say the Halberdiers are actually kind of a no-duh with her.
And I guess the reasoning for that is Crusader's Call, Houseguard Thane makes them just insanely fast. Mini feet as well. You're charging 15 inches at an effective Mat 8, POW 14. That's solid. For a 4/7 unit, I will take that any day of the week.
With reform, don't forget that.
We don't even get to the special rules. Just look at their straight offensive potential, and then they do other stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Halberder's a great unit. Mage Hunter Strike Force. Everybody's always been saying, well, Ret will never get some sort of Def debuff or Rat buff because that makes them insane. It does make them better, obviously. I think there's already been a post up on the PP forums identifying that no, it is not instantaneous caster death if you get them in the feet, but it's really, really good under the feet and just simply winning that attrition war. I mean, they're effectively going to be taking out an infantry model almost between 1.5 Mage Hunter Strike Force models, and that's a really good trade-off, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're definitely winning the attrition game if you're hitting that hard on any turn.
Yep.
Also, just as a side note, if you're a new player to Retribution, pick up Houseguard Halberdiers. In the same way that, like, if you're a new player to Menoth, pick up Temple Flame Guard. These cheap spearman units will save you from so many mistakes early on, and they will teach you so much about positioning in the game while giving you a buffer against errors you might make with other units that will completely screw you up.
And a quick note with the Halberdiers as well, Reform is really good because it allows you to push up and protect most of the units. So you've got people on the front line that then move forward, the other guys are moving back, so they're protecting the rest of you, so you're gaining territory even after you've killed someone. So if somebody else is trying to jam you, you can take care of their front line or even their second line and then move forward after you've done that. So you're gaining territory against a jam while your jam is effectively jamming.
Right, and even, like, if you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, like, a lot of new players end up in situations where they are being outcharged, like, maybe not in a Issyria list, but in other lists where your opponent just has a longer threat range than you, you have set defense, and, like, they're cheap. You can spread them out a little bit. They've got the shield wall, so they can take a charge decently.
Yep. But basically, they're a really good unit. Get them. They might not be your most offensive unit, and quite often they might not do a lot of game in terms of actually killing things, but even if they're not doing that, they let everything else function a lot easier behind them.
Yeah, right. You can't screw them up, really. So, yeah, Houseguard Halberdiers and the UA. Get those.
And then every other unit.
Well.
All right,
so says PP.
Yeah. One of my favorite units as well is the Stormfall Archers, and we haven't even talked about them, but under the feet or against a lower def unit from the Blinding Light spell, they can put quite a bit of damage, and I guess it's quite unfortunate that they're not. Blinding Light can't go on jacks because I'd love to be dropping 4 reliable brutal shots into a jack, but particularly medium-sized infantry models, Stormfalls there could help. Obviously the Invictors are a good option there as well, but there's so much that the -2 def helps with. I haven't even talked about Mage Hunter Infiltrators or Sentinels, and Sentinels certainly didn't need the buff in terms of hitting, but Mage Hunter Infiltrators under Crusader's Call, same with Sentinels, extra threat range, you're getting that first strike off. We like our infantry.
Yeah, I like the Stormfall Archers a lot. You have to be very careful what list you put them in.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's similar to like how you can spend points on solos and end up with a really small elite army. Stormfall Archers are kind of the same. You spend 5 points for 4 models. It's so easy to build a Retribution army that has so few models in it. And it's like you've got all these tricks, like everyone is bringing decent stuff to the table, but your list just ends up with no meat. And especially if you want to be playing an attrition game, like Issyria has to, because she has no personal attacks, you really have to keep an eye on your model count.
And this is going again back to where we were talking about at the beginning. She does a lot of stuff. pick some of those things and go with it. Don't try and do everything. I mean, she can run lots and lots of super solos and go nuts. I mean, just her Thanes, you can be really, really good with her as well. The Artificer can help her protect, chucking in some character solos, Narn, A&H. I'm not going to say don't take A&H. Obviously, they're a very solid unit, particularly with the shooting. Why not under that feat? That would be disgusting. But as Biscuit's saying, it's really easy to get a lot of buffing tech and then just have 1 or 2 units. If you come up against somebody who can go through a lot of infantry quickly, you're going to have a lot of buff and no units quickly as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, I think there's a lot more that we can say about her, but I think we'll wrap it up for this time, and we'll maybe talk a bit more about the changes in Ret in general next time. This is getting a bit long, and I know you guys all love our voices, but we won't keep you here forever, because I know you're glued to us. I guess any closing comments, Biscuit?
I just reiterate what you were just saying about how, and this goes for all lists, not just Issyria, you have to pick what your list wants to do, and you have to support that strategy. This is something you see screwed up a lot, because people will try to take lists and they know what the power units are, and so they'll just put a lot of those in, but not build towards any sort of cohesive strategy. And that can win games. It'll easily win games against bad players, but you're going to struggle against focus lists a lot. And especially with casters like Issyria, where she has a very select set of tricks with broad application. You have to start out building your list knowing what you want to do.
And that still means it's not saying that when you go to the table that your list is only going to do 1 or 2 things. There's still tons of things that you can do with it. I mean, again, we'll go with, say, Halbs, Invictors, Mage Hunters. There's still lots of different applications that those spells will have with them. You're just not trying to say, okay, I've got Halberdiers, Mage Hunters, Invictors, 3 Warjacks, Hyperion, 200 solos. I mean, you wouldn't even fit that into a list, but you're saying, okay, what are a couple of things that I'm really going to take advantage out of her, and then utilize those to as much as I can within the game.
Right. Like, you can stick in as many different units and tricks to use your spell list as you want, but at the end of the day, she's always going to have 8 focus.
Unless you're really good at modifying her card.
20 focus, oh my god.
I was only going to go with 81. Or maybe a bit more realistic, 18. We'll go with 18.
Yeah, so many tricks.
Alright guys, well thanks for listening to our first War Machine Nerdcast, and I'm sure we'll be back soon to talk a bit more about it.
Good night.
Or good morning.